white pieces. So he might be able to control the narrative of the amount of complications he could get on, or we get the king spawn opening. And will Nordebek try to play something aggressive with a central pawn break, or will we see a more cautious approach with the Spanish?
Yeah, instead it's the Scotch opening, the Scotch game. We see a trade of knights here. Nordebek advances with his pawn in the center. This is known to be very, very ambitious with white. You've ruined the black pawn structure. Neither side can castle easily. The queens are both a bit clumsy, and therefore it leads to more imbalance. And a very interesting choice by Nordebek. I think a good practical decision. Depends how well prepared Magnus Carlsen is, of course, but unlikely that Magnus has looked at this unfashionable opening in recent times.
And this is interesting as well, purely in the history of the Esports World Cup and what's gone on so far today. On the surface, we're going, ooh, difficult to calculate, unclear positions. Magnus has got to be favored against anyone in the field. But we've had surprise after surprise sprung at us today in this very arena. So Abdusattorov here trying to manufacture one of his own.
Well, no surprises so far in this match, with Magnus sort of grinding that end game. So it really comes down to this. Can Nordebek, get that shocker in? Can he get the big upset in? Can he get his win to force an Armageddon? Not going to be easy, but I think it's a bit of an opening success. He forced Magnus to take a think, which means that Magnus is perhaps not as comfortable in the Scotch opening as he would have been in the other setups. Magnus, meanwhile, sets up a development concept for his bishop, which we call the fianchetto, to try to get to that central e5 pawn.
And I'd like to think that I have a little hand in this. This was my pet opening with white in Blitz for the last 10 years.
Oh.
I've played hundreds and hundreds of Blitz games in this exact variation, with the Scotch, the white knight coming out early. But unlikely Nordebek was looking at...
Next 10 moves, David. Go.
Next 10 moves.
Let's go.
Both sides are going to bring their bishops out. Both sides are going to get castled. White's going to defend the e5 pawn with a rook, maybe with a knight. And it's going to be a very imbalanced middle game. One that I don't think is better for white, but at least gives some chances.
Wait, hang on. This is your best pet, this is your pet opening for the last 10 years, and then you end this with, by the way, I don't actually think it's better for white.
No, it's just tricky. Okay. That's my
just
Blitz
checking.
style.
You swindler.
Okay, the black knight doesn't move. It was hit. There's a pin. The black bishop on a6 pins down the white c4 pawn, and both sides do get castled. I'm expecting Magnus to do the same here, but the eval bar getting a bit more optimistic for white. I have found from my experience in this opening that the black bishop on a6 is very misplaced in a lot of variations, kind of bites on granite. So some hope for Nordebek.
Oh, okay. So are we thinking like if white can, I don't know, cement a pawn on b3, get a rook to the d or e file, and just move the queen out of the way? You're asking black the question, thanks for developing your bishop to a6. What are you doing there? And there's just no good place for it to go. Is that the idea?
That's the hope.
Okay.
No guarantees, especially against Magnus, but that is the hope. The black knight in the center is kind of caught in two minds as well. It's not directly attacked because of the pin from the black bishop on a6, but at some point it will have to give way.
And that point will be when Nordebek decides to move the queen away and unpin itself. Right now, he does improve the position of the knight, trying to not only defend that e5 pawn, but sort of eye those greener pastures. There's a nice central square for the knight to eventually jump on. Magnus decides enough is enough, moves his knight away, attacks the pawn. John, your idea of b3, consolidating the pawn in c4, but Magnus tripling down on it.
This is fun because, as we all know from streamer chess, en passant is forced. Unfortunately, if that gets played here, the dark squared bishop from black is eyeing up a free rook on a1. So gonna have to break the rules on this occasion. And suddenly, that bishop on a6 is frankly applying a heck of a lot of pressure to the c-file.
It is for now. En passant would also drop the white queen. There's a pin on the e-file and on the long diagonal. So multiple pins that Magnus Carlsen is using to try and win this match. But for now, there are still resources here. And even dropping the c4 pawn, even allowing that black bishop on a6 back into the game, isn't the end of the world. White otherwise has a very healthy pawn structure.
And I think what those tactics will be relying on is you give up the c4 pawn with the hopes and dreams of activating your own light squared bishop on g2. You're eyeing those c-pawn weaknesses that Magnus has created if there's a trade on the c4 square. So a lot of tactics. It sort of seems like the position that's about to explode. I don't see a healthy way for Nordebek to defend the pawn, and I think he's setting up those ideas. Saying, Magnus Carlsen, take my pawn, I'm going to play for compensation. If you were to grab on c4, Magnus does not rush.
Magnus has studied these types of things before. I've seen him play these types of positions in Blitz. I'm very surprised, therefore, that Nordebek having chosen this opening, is the one lower on the clock. He's a minute and a half down. After all, if you choose the opening, you want to be well versed in it and at least land the surprise, land the time advantage. But for now, world number 1 Magnus Carlsen looking very comfortable.
Are there any kind of positions that Magnus Carlsen hasn't studied before, David Howell?
That's true. Freestyle chess positions, but he loves those too.
Yeah, I hear he's quite good at that as well, unfortunately. So it feels like he's a bit of a Swiss Army knife. What you could say one of the best. Isn't that interesting? But in this kind of position, I love the fact that even though the c4 pawn can be won, Magnus is taking his time about it, right? It's not exactly like a wonderful full pawn up that you can easily convert in an endgame because there are still doubled pawns on the c-file. It's not the biggest advantage in the world. He can sort of take his time here. Isn't that interesting?
He doesn't need to rush with that decision because there's really no good way for white to actually defend that pawn at any given moment. You know, you never want to retreat your knight to hang that pawn because you lose another central one instead. So he's just saying the moment you unpin your queen is when I'll grab that pawn. But I'm not going to rush with that decision. I'll just keep the tension on till then. You waste a move, that's when I'll win that pawn. And then we see a few more moves here coming in with tempo, attacks the queen. Magnus pushes that bishop back. Nordebek bringing it to f4, keeping the center under control. Some trades. Eventually, I'm expecting Magnus to go up a pawn because of that c4 weakness.
I'm very surprised that Nordebek kind of invited this. He lost a tempo with his bishop. The white dark square bishop moved out, hit the black queen, then retreated. This is the plan that Magnus wanted to set up anyway. He wanted to break out and erode white's stronghold in the center. Now that pawn for white on e5 has disappeared. Yes, you can take back on e5 with your bishop, but it's only going to result in trades. You kind of pin yourself as well on the e-file. This feels like it's gone wrong for Nordebek in the last 2 moves. 3 minutes down as well on the clock.
Very tricky. And the reason you can't capture that pawn with your own knight is because then Magnus Carlsen has set up the g5 idea, deflecting the defender. All the pins on the e-line will land into trouble. So instead, capturing with the bishop. And now Magnus has plenty of choices. You could trade. You could get more attack, you know, you pin it, you win it, find a way to get to that bishop, grab on c4, a lot of tempting options, and Magnus chooses one that's perhaps the strongest, wins material.
We see a quick queen trade, but in the process, Magnus has won a rook for bishop. Yes, it's only the exchange, as we call it in chess, but the black rook looks mighty strong as well. Question mark given to Nordebek's last move. It feels like if Magnus is solid enough, if he makes sure there's no counterplay, the bishops don't break out, then he should still be in control. Nordebek, it feels like a roll of the dice.
It's not all about grinding out those small imbalances to try and find a win in the endgame. Magnus showing that he can out-position and out-tactic opponents in the middle game as well, showing some of the versatility that has made him the #1 player that he is today. So frustrating position for Nordebek to be in. And I also want to point out, yes, okay, players go exchanges down all the time, but this quickly against a player like Nordebek, it's just incredible the kind of things that Magnus can pull out of his hat.
Yeah, looked like a level opening position.
Right.
And 5 moves later, he's a rook for bishop up in a game he only needs to draw with black. Magnus, though, kind of accepting that it's not over yet. Just to point out, white does have a big threat on the board. The white knight wants to enter the center, land on d4, attacking the black rook, and winning a pawn on c6 in the process. So Magnus needs to preemptively deal with that one.
And he also kind of understands, right, the moments where he needs to pause. He understands these threats that his opponent's setting up and just sort of doesn't give them the chance. Like you said, the one big idea, and look at that. Magnus just coolly and calmly not only defends the a5 pawn, also takes control of the c6 pawn. Now he can just fall back with the rook, gain complete control. He's up on material. I mean, he's playing like liquid here. Impossible to contain, smooth endgame conversion. Brilliant stuff by Magnus.
Could become solid if need be, this liquid player. And he's just covered all the holes, rock solid. Again, it's a change of gears. He accelerates it, wins the material, then he takes a step back. He knows he's done the hard work, and just defending everything is enough for now. Nordebek needs something special, but if there's nothing immediate here, black will have time to make use of that rook.
Feels really strange as well, being in a position where the light squared bishops are staring each other down through several pawns in the center of the board, where actually, like, the position's kind of opening up, but the bishops are still just staring. Everywhere else, the action's been absolutely insane, but really, the minor pieces just feel like they're on lockdown a little bit.
It's amazing how Magnus has attacked and also defended. You know, that bishop on b7, it also doesn't only take control of c6, but makes sure that the d5 pawn is also supremely guarded, not allowing the bishop pair to get active. And now Magnus's knight comes into the game, tying down the white knight to defend the b3 pawn. It could next jump to the center of the board, knight e4 coming on, trying to trade off more pieces as the game goes towards a Magnus win.
Yeah, unfortunately for Nodebek, he's coming up against the best front runner in chess history. When Magnus has a lead, you nearly never see him get pegged back. He knows how to just set up the barricades, be defensive, trade off the right pieces. You need to make sure Magnus is on edge, going for the win, because then you can counterattack. Here, counterattacking chance is minimal. The white rook indirectly eyeing up the black knight, but that black knight, as you mentioned, Tanya, can land in the center, can improve. The black pawns will start rolling. Minimal chance of a miracle here for Nodebek.
It jumps further into the game, attacks the rook and plants itself on a square where it's inviting a trade, but that trade will only help black to connect the pawns. Now the c-pawn's freed up, you know, it could go to c5, displace that white knight, which is a power piece at the center, c5 being set up. This is beautifully played by Magnus in this endgame.
We were talking earlier about how, okay, no big advantage here yet. The c-pawns were doubled. They didn't look great. It didn't look like it was a game-winning asset. And then you compare it to now, and you're thinking, hang on a second, Magnus has just been playing 20 moves ahead of everyone else because this is suddenly looking beautiful. The d-pawn will be able to roll down the board with tempo as well. I mean, he just manufactures this out of thin air, I swear.
Yeah, and it just looks so smooth and effortless, almost. The black c-pawn hitting the white knight, c5, d4. Push those pawns. Nodebek is going to get steamrolled. And the rook versus bishop kind of dynamic here just doesn't provide any counterplay long term. And okay, a trade, as you mentioned there, Tanya, though, the pawns will just begin to roll. He's hitting 2 pawns. He's hitting d5 as well. But trades here only going to guide black closer to that desired goal of a safe endgame.
And you've got to watch out, right? Magnus has all these ideas of that c-pawn moving even further and then creating a b-passer that's going to be unstoppable on the board. Magnus just grooving in his head. He's enjoying the position that he has. You know, he's got it all under control. Meanwhile, for Nodebek, and these are the hard wins, right, where you can't figure out what went wrong. You don't even see a mistake that you've made. How do you overcome this mental block against a player like that? It's just psychologically just a very difficult place for a player to be, even the world number 7.
I'm afraid I'm in very much the stereotypical Hollywood movie guy going, it all happens so fast. I'm one of those guys who I don't have an answer to that question. It is unbelievable the extent to which Magnus can make it feel like I've done nothing wrong, and yet I'm not just getting beaten, I'm getting crushed.
We mentioned earlier, we've seen it all before. We've seen Magnus grind out these endgames hundreds, thousands of times, but feel for his opponents here. They've been on the receiving end of it. They've been victims to these endgame masterclasses so many times as well, and it's a matter of moments now before Magnus starts pushing those pawns forward, full control. 5 minutes against 1 here. Nodebek, he just never got in the game. It was just the previous endgame. It all turned there. He didn't hold, and he's being punished now. Magnus getting ready to start trading favorably. And, okay, playing safety first chess, dropping one of his central pawns, but still very much in control.
Another pawn could be picked up right now if you're white. Rook takes pawn, defending the knight. Magnus has set up his own bishop retreating. He wants to get as many pieces off the board as possible. There are back rank ideas if white goes pawn hunting. Bishop b7, it's on the board. The knight had to retreat, defending. Rook d1 check. Wait, could you still go for this?
You could land a check with the black rook, even drop the exchange rook for knight, then white knight will take back on d1. But at the very end, the white bishop will be forced to self-pin and be lost.
That awkward move that didn't feel great earlier on, David. Bishop on a6, saving the day now.
Exactly, and note how the white knight didn't take the black rook because the white knight is forced to defend its bishop. Cool tactic on the board by Magnus, and now he's going to go hunting for the white b3 pawn.
Just super stuff, right? Combining positional elements, strategic elements, and when the tactics present themselves, he just grabs it with both hands to finish it off in style. And now the b3 pawn, no one's coming to its defense. It will start marching up the board. You could just slide the rook away, clear the path, go b3. But look at this. Magnus doesn't want to give any chances to Nodebek's knight there. Make sure that knight isn't getting close to the black king.
The knight jumping, hitting a rook. Magnus, though, just setting up his rooks in an ideal spot. He retreats, covering all pawns. And yeah, the problem is for Nodebek, even if you play really well, you might secure a draw. Magnus is actually repeating the position. Will we see a draw? It is a draw, and Magnus Carlsen takes the match.
Nodebek the match. Magnus just doing
fairly comfortable. He does put on a jacket here, so, you know, he's getting super comfy for this game as we do go with e4 first move.
Yeah, and the Italian, we called it, Nemo. Magnus usually plays bishop c5 here, I believe, but he goes knight f6, inviting the fried liver, but Duda says no, he goes d3 and h6. Duda often likes playing an early bishop g5, going for a very combative game, and that's perhaps why Magnus played h6, taking out that option.
I just want to point out, this is not Magnus's first match of the day, which means he might have prepared for this match very intensely as well.
Possibly so. So Magnus goes h6. Perhaps white has a slight advantage here, but it's super solid for black. So let's see what's going to happen. Kingside castles by Magnus. And Duda has a few plans here. One plan could be to go bishop e3, preparing knight c4, which would force black to drop the bishop back to a7. But another typical plan in the Italian is to go h3, followed by rook e1, knight f1 to g3.
The rook e1, knight f1 plan is always pretty popular, but here we do see h3. And black is actually the one that goes with knight e7, knight to g3, g6.
Yeah, those knights really like being on g3 and g6. So a typical maneuver here by Magnus, aiming for the g6 square. And let's see what Duda's going to do. Yeah, rook e1 followed by knight f1 to g3 is a typical plan. Bishop e3 followed by knight c4 as well. So he's paused the thing. I'm curious what he's going to do.
This is probably an opening both players are quite familiar with. It's just a matter of strategy.
Absolutely, but Duda is the first one to fall behind on the clock. Magnus already up 40 seconds. So let's see, he goes d4, an early pawn push, but perhaps just knight g6, defending that pawn on e5 once more. And now let's see what Duda is going to do. I like rook e1. Perhaps also you have an idea to go bishop f1, followed by knight c4, hitting the bishop on b6 and that e5 pawn.
That is certainly a valid plan here. Rook e1, very logical. You move your bishop back potentially, but you do get to put your knight higher up on the fourth rank.
Yep, so let's see, Duda, oh, he trades right away. I don't like that move, and Magnus is also, he gives that look like, oh, not impressed by that one, because I don't understand why he traded the d4 pawn for the d6 pawn. That was what was giving him more space in the middle.
Typically, also, when you're pushing for a win, you don't really want to open up the center like this. Now the d file is open. It gives potential for queen trades, and we all know how comfortable Magnus is in those type of positions.
Exactly, and Magnus would love to get the queens off, simplify the position a little bit. And so, yeah, with every pawn trade, the position gets more simplified. That being said, though, almost all of the pieces are still on the board. Only one pawn trade has happened, and that's kind of what you want in a must-win game.
It's true, but it feels like with this type of open position, it is more difficult for white to be pushing for the win, which Jan Krzysztof Duda is right now in a situation where he has to push for a win.
Oh, and look at that move, knight h5. We said that Duda is going to push for it. Magnus might have something to say about that as well. He's aiming to go queen f6, knight h to f4, and all of a sudden things could get pretty scary for white on the king side. So I really like Magnus's approach, and he's also up almost a minute on the clock. You
know, one of the best strategies for how to win your game, for how to draw your game, is to go for the win in the first place. Absolutely, yeah. You don't want to play too passively. That's where you get on the back foot and your opponent gains more and more ground on you. So Magnus, absolutely the right approach here. I mean, he's got a lot of experience in these matches, so we don't need to tell him what to do. Right, he was not playing for a draw to start. No, absolutely not. So knight h5, nice move by him. Now let's see what Duda is going to do. I mean, bishop f1, yeah, Magnus's moves are so easy now. Queen f6, since the d file is open, he could slide a rook over to d8. It just seems really annoying for White to deal with all of that pressure. See, I really wish that Duda had played knight f1, knight to g3, perhaps earlier, maybe instead of taking on e5, before taking on e5, because now the knight on h5 is a really tough knight to deal with. And if he had gotten that knight to g3 previously, this would not have happened. No, absolutely not. Yeah, so let's see what he's going to do. I mean, he's almost down 2 minutes on the clock now. Knight f1 does invite a queen trade, but I'd say right here, I mean, you should just be happy to keep the game going, because if black gets queen f6 in, rook d8, knight hf4, things could get really scary on the king side, and it might be over before we know it. And that's why Duda has really paused to think. Black has these really easy moves. I mean, he knows what's coming, but it's not easy to deal with it at all. One of the issues here is that Duda has not finished developing his queen side. He still has a bishop on c1, and while the knight has moved from b1, it is currently sitting on d2 without that much future prospects.
Yeah, it's hard to get that bishop into the game. I mean, he needs to move that knight, but where's the big question? I mean, he can also go to b3, but I feel like, okay, rook a2, interesting move. So he's laterally adding a defender to the king side. He's now defending that f2 point. Perhaps an idea, Nemo, is that he wants to go knight f1, and then king h2, so the f2 pawn is protected, and then he can go g3s, making sure that it's not that easy for Magnus to move a knight f4.
However, while he is able to do that, it does mean that he's putting a lot of effort into defending his king side, and it's actually Magnus who is pressuring on the king side now, as he does play queen f6, as you had suggested. Yeah,
queen f6, a very logical move by Magnus, bringing the queen into the game. Let's see what Duda is going to do. He can go knight f1 or bishop f1, but Magnus's moves are so easy. Rook d8 is coming next, and knight is jumping to f4. And Duda almost down 3 minutes on the clock. He goes knight f1. I guess rook d8 is going to be met with rook d2, which looks awkward, but you have to deal with that move somehow.
I mean, I would almost go queen to b3, perhaps try to cause some issues in Black's king side. Defending seems very difficult here.
Right, but queen b3, keep in mind, that does invite a move like bishop takes h3, because if that bishop will be captured, you hang your knight on f3. And there we have rook d8 on the board, rook d2 by Duda. And let's see, we see a rook trade. Now that bishop finally comes in.
But there's still bishop takes h3.
Wait, but pawn takes and then knight f4? You're just hacking a full
Knight
piece?
h4.
Oh, and if the knight gets captured, there's queen takes f2 and queen g1 checkmate. Wow. Oh, and knight h4, you hit the knight, and if you go bishop e2, there's queen g6. Let's see if Magnus is going to find it.
You're basically just trying to open up the g file and get this knight out of the way, so you have some access to the white king here as Magnus. But he does not play bishop takes h3.
Yeah, the variations were certainly not easy at all, because after knight h4, there might have still been knight 1 to h2, so you can also meet queen g6 with knight g4. So a logical move by Magnus. He did not want to spend all of his time calculating that. a5, but now he's paused the thing, whereas normally you would think bishop a7 is an automatic move.
I do want to point out that knight h to f4, he did spend 25 seconds on that move. That is almost the most amount of time Magnus has spent on a move so far in this game.
Yeah, he's been playing quite quickly. Bishop a7 has been chosen. Now, I like the move bishop e3, perhaps for Duda, to alleviate the pressure a little bit on the diagonal. If you can get your knight at e3, I can see white emerging with an advantage here if the attack on the king side does not crash through.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on, just getting rid of this knight with bishop takes f4, or at least getting rid of one of them so far?
Right, but another one appears on the f4 square, so no, I was going to suggest a line like bishop takes f4, knight takes e5, but I guess something like knight takes h3 is just crushing.
Yeah, I'm just really worried about these two knights hanging out around Jan Krzysztof's king.
Yeah, it's certainly annoying to deal with. I mean, if I would get a few moves for Duda, this is what I would do. I'd love to go bishop e3, trade the bishops, go knight e3, bishop f1.
He's played the first part of that plan.
And the evil bar made a massive drop. So now, I mean, bishop takes h3 is looking really tempting. And let's see if Magnus is going to go for it.
I like to call this one the Cyprus gift because the Greek gift is on h2. So if he does play bishop takes h3, g takes h3, knight takes h3 with the check, you immediately have 2 pawns for compensation.
You have 2 pawns. Keep in mind also that a draw is enough for Magnus. So if you're calculating and you see like, yeah, and there we have bishop takes h3 on the board, a perpetual is always going to be a win for him. So that makes calculating a lot easier.
That makes Magnus's second excellent move of this match.
Yeah, fantastic move there by Magnus. Bishop takes a7. I guess there's just going to be bishop takes g2, and the attack is crazy. But yeah, knight takes h3. How do you get out of this? Because if you go to the h file, you hang the pawn on f2, and the attack just rages on.
But if you go to g2, there is just simply bringing in the knight from g6 to f4.
Yeah, this is looking tough for Duda. I mean, perhaps the knight needs to be taken. The knight takes f4, and then you move the king to h1, or you have to move to the h file. But I mean, Magnus also having a massive lead on the clock. This is looking tough for Duda.
Yeah, unfortunately, king to h2 might have to be Duda's move. And while he is currently up a piece, it's very easy for Magnus to bring his very last piece, the rook, on a8 with rook a to d8 into the game.
Right, he goes king to h2, but knight takes f2 is another pawn for Magnus. I suppose you're going to have to go queen e2, but this is such a nice position for Magnus, especially, like I said earlier, because a draw is always going to be enough.
A draw is always going to be enough. And that's something that's really worrying when your king is sitting on h2 with no pawns in front of it.
Absolutely, yeah. A perpetual will always be a win for Magnus. So let's see now what Duda is going to do. He, again, to his credit, is hanging in there. We saw that also in the match against Fabiano. He was on the back foot for most of it, but he hung in there and managed to win the match. If you go knight g4, the king is going to slide back to g1, sorry, to h1. And a trade on e3 is not too bad for black. The knight finally makes it into the game, can jump to d5, and maybe your rook can slide over to f1. And I could see things potentially moving in Duda's favor.
That would almost make it easier for Duda. If anything, Magnus should be, you know, relatively happy in this position, potentially keeping some of these pieces on.
Right, so let's see what Magnus is going to do. The knight on f2 is under attack. Knight g4 looks very logical. It comes with a check. But again, the king is going to slide back to h1. Maybe that knight f4, that second knight making its entrance. Let's see what he's going to do.
This is a very, very crucial position. Oh, we do have bishop takes e3, followed by knight takes e3 and queen to f4 check.
That's not an easy check to deal with. King g1. I mean, Duda is impressive in these positions. I mean, he's a tactical player. He's really good when his back is against wall with queen g3. Okay, so how do you keep the game going here? King f1, okay. Keep in mind, again, a draw means a match win for Magnus.
What does Magnus do in this situation? Is there knight takes e4? Okay.
I thought so, but the evil bar is now swinging in Duda's favor. Perhaps bishop takes f7, king takes, and then queen c4. You pick up that knight on e4.
Wow.
And there he goes.
As you just said, Duda is a very tactical player. He is finding these resources.
I mean, he is amazing with his back against the wall. I think a lot of players would have just collapsed, but he finds the best moves. The evil bar would not move when Duda would move, meaning he found the best move. And
do you think in this position, Magnus should just play king h8 instead of taking on f7?
And that's an option, but then Duda could perhaps force the queens off with queen g2. So I really think this one is moving in Duda's favor.
Definitely. Duda has very good fighting chances now, as he is also only 1 minute behind Magnus now on the clock.
Yeah, Magnus' time advantage is dwindling. His advantage has completely disappeared. It's now in Duda's favor. King h7 was chosen by Magnus. All right, so I still like queen g2 forcing the queen trade.
Queen g2 forcing the queen trade is certainly interesting, but what are your thoughts on maybe something really, 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 really tricky? What about knight to g4?
Definitely an option as well. Wow, hitting the knight on e4, and then also after bishop takes g6, black would be forced to recapture with the king. And I don't know if you saw, but Magnus threw up his hands. He was like, what am I doing? Because he was in complete control. And now it's Duda who's in the driver's seat. Although Duda is down 1.5 minutes on the clock.
Duda, super good with the tactics, right? I mean, I think knight g4 is potentially, you know, a move that could really swing this in his direction.
Right, but there's quite a bit of calculating. I mean, knight g4, queen h3, I suppose queen g2, knight g3, king f2. He goes knight f5 instead, but oh, wait, what is that? Queen h3? Oh, knight f4.
And played instantly by Magnus.
Oh, and look at the head check from Duda. That's a massive blunder. Knight takes g3 will be met with knight takes g3 check, and you win quite some material as you will emerge.
Both queens are hanging here, as well as, well, a couple of the knights too. But there's a lot of options here. There's knight takes g3. You can maybe try, wow, I don't even know what else you could play. If queen takes e4 here from Duda, there's simply queen to g2 with checkmate.
Yeah, I think this move knight f4 by Magnus seals the game. I think you're gonna have to go into that endgame. But then after all of the trades, Magnus will have a rook and 3 pawns against the 2 minor pieces. And I feel like the 2 minor pieces cannot do that much damage. So I feel like Magnus is in a great spot now to win the match.
Right, knight takes e2 is going to come in here from Magnus probably relatively quickly. There's a lot of pawns on that king side.
Yeah, I wonder why he's paused to think. I mean, okay, goes rook f8, hitting the bishop, forcing knight takes e5. Now knight takes e2 has to be played. And yeah, now g5, followed by king g7. I don't see a good way for Duda to keep the game going here.
As a reminder to everyone, even a draw is going to get Magnus into the next level.
Absolutely. But now perhaps knight d7, aiming for c5, where it would hit the pawn on b7. He goes knight d3 instead. Perhaps now Magnus has the time to go b7, b6, stopping that knight jump. So let's see. I mean, like you pointed out, I mean, a draw is going to mean a match win for Magnus, so it's really hard for Duda to win this position.
It is very, very difficult. Magnus has those connected pass pawns on the g file and h file. The white bishop is going to be tied down over there.
Right, so we see Duda going c4. Now rook f5 can be met with c5. I mean, if that a-pawn disappears, the game is practically over. You're never going to win that. So Magnus goes rook b8, knight c5 now. I mean, this is still not over anymore. If Duda can win that a-pawn, he has a real shot at winning, because also that bishop on h5 is blocking all of the pawns on the king side.
Yeah, Magnus doesn't really want to play rook to a8 here because he has to worry a little bit about how passive his rook is going to be. So instead, he plays rook to b2.
King e3 by Duda. Now, I mean, you can go rook a2, get rid of the a-pawn, but Duda will take on a6, take on c7, and all he needs is one passed pawn, and that c-pawn could potentially give him the win. I mean, it's still a tall task.
Well, he could go c6 after knight takes a6 instead of taking immediately on a5, which would let him, you know, keep his c-pawn for now.
Oh, that is a fantastic move by Magnus. And look at Duda. He's like, how did I miss that move? I think if Magnus takes the a-pawn, that's practically match over, because look at this. Okay, king d4, knight b8. Okay, but now what?
c5, perhaps?
Okay, the king moves up to d5, and then, I mean, that c-pawn is probably going to be lost sooner or later. I mean, the question is whether Magnus can quickly set his own pawns in motion.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I believe if Magnus tries to keep the king, sorry, if Duda tries to keep the king close with king to d5, there was potentially rook a6 and you could swing the rook over to h2, but after king f6, now it's a little less clear.
Right, so king f6 trick, very logical move by Magnus. He was aiming to go king f5 and push the g-pawn. That's why Duda played bishop g4, forcing that king back. But again, if Magnus gets those pawns rolling, I think it will be really hard for Duda to prolong this game. So let's see what he's going to do. Maybe king takes c5, takes with the knight instead, but now rook g1. How do you stop the g-pawn?
That's a great question.
And g4, there the pawn goes. Also h5, h4. Magnus's moves are just too easy here. And Nemo, Duda down to 40 seconds on the clock.
Duda down to 40 seconds. This is going to be crazy. Well, he knows he has to push for the win, so he's really trying to spend all of his time doing that.
Yeah, but it's really hard. I mean, you have to move the knight out of the way, then c5, c6. But it's, I mean, Magnus's play is just so easy.
He's spending a lot of time on this move. Unfortunately, knight e4 is actually not even going to stop the g3 pawn push, as Magnus can just play g3.
Yeah, g3 here looks like a very logical move for Magnus. Also h5, I mean, pushing the h-pawn also seems pretty tough. You could give a check first, king e5, okay, and rook c1. All Magnus needs to do is get rid of that c-pawn. Bishop h3 therefore was forced, and a rook c2. I mean, I think knight takes g3 is forced, but rook takes c5, it's going to be a draw.
This is going to be a draw.
All you have to do is get rid of one of the minor pieces. Rook c3 is going to take the knight, and that's going to be it.
Wow.
It's very difficult there. If we see Nihal maybe try to shore up his defenses, lock this game down, escape with a draw, take his chances in the final game with white, then we might see Magnus try to just minimize the risk. And there already the first face from Magnus, as we see the first surprise as well.
You know, Magnus loves a challenge. We saw that with that smile on his face when Nihal declined the repetition. I think he'd want a game on. He's not going to just give Nihal that shutdown opportunity, because that definitely, like you said, David, has to be Nihal's strat here, right? You try to just play it safe with black, get that draw in, final game, go all out. All guns blazing on Magnus with white. I think Magnus will play to try to wrap this up in 3. That's his style.
I've revised my what am I looking out for in the middle game. Previously, I said, okay, it's all about whether or not Nihal Sarin can get that clock advantage on Magnus Carlsen. I'm gonna change that based on what we saw in the last game. I'm going to say it depends on what both players do with their first deep think. Because if we don't see an amazing advantage or maybe a really, really cool complex continuation that puts Magnus in the tank, then that deep think would have been for naught. So I want to understand when Nihal is choosing his moments to use that time and whether he can do that effectively here against Magnus. He's going to need to do that if he wants to win this game.
100%. He'll need to invest that time wisely, need to not fall behind on the clock. Good start to this game by Nihal. He's 1 minute up already. Yeah. Quick surprise here in the Queen's Gambit declined. We saw a trade of pawns. Magnus is the king of this pawn structure. He normally prefers it, though, from the black side. We call this the Carlsbad pawn structure, with things locked, at least short term. No real pawn breaks in the middle of the board. And black's light squared bishop coming out. Good news for Nihal. Looks like a very healthy, stable position to build from.
That's one of the aims if you're playing black in this Queen's Gambit declined Carlsbad structure, right? You want your bishop on the light squares, but Magnus with his last move is potentially hinting at a g4 to develop to Fianchetto his own bishop and get aggressive. That could be the other way to get the pieces out. Instead, he targets the bishop with the knight and wins it. He's got an unchallenged bishop. That is the first imbalance of the game.
First, maybe of many, but for now, Nihal has to decide how to develop his pieces. We see bishop for knight trade. Black has doubled pawns. That comes with pros and cons. Black's pawns on the g-file mean that the h-file and the rook there is open. So both sides probably reluctant to castle on that flank until a decision is made by the opponent here.
Yeah, it feels like who's going to blink first. Actually, this is the best moment for the first castle graphic as far as I'm concerned. I'm looking here going, who's going to blink first in this position? Can you go kingside? Well, actually, opposite side castling and launching a big attack is possible if you miscalculate this.
Let's predict. Which way is the black king going? It's Nihal Sarin's move right now.
I predict the black king goes the exact same way as Magnus's king goes.
Yeah.
He goes to the left, Magnus, and Nihal does it first. He gets it on the queen side.
I thought there was a chance maybe that Magnus would react to Nihal and choose to go the opposite side, but no such luck. If it was black, black would absolutely respond to white, but it's interesting that black castled first, Magnus still responded in kind.
Yeah, I think normally, especially for Nihal, who's behind in the match, you kind of want to wait to see where your opponent's king goes. Magnus, because he wants safety first, he's ahead. He's happy to castle on the same flank. Nihal ideally would have gone the other way, no matter where Magnus has gone with his king. He would castle the opposite flank, but ultimately there were no remaining useful moves. He had to commit, and here we see, again, the V pawn structure, or white's pawns all on dark squares from the center to that right flank, and the black knight sitting pretty on g4 for now.
And it's going to be now about finding plans, right? You've placed your minors where they are. The knight on g4 looking good. The queen on d6 centralized. One of your rook on the open lines. On the e-file center of the board, the rook on h8. Guess what? It's already developed from its starting position. You don't need to move it any further. And if you're Nihal, you need to find a way to either shut down this action, to make sure things remain under control, or create some dynamics. I think he's going to go for the former. He's not going to try to push too many pawns. He's not going to provoke weaknesses. If the opportunities come, he'll take it. But he won't take the fight to Magnus.
But yeah, because this isn't a must-win game here, remember. If we draw this game, Nihal Sarin will still go to a game number 4. It is still possible for him to take this tie to Armageddon or even win it in game number 4.
It's a must-not-lose game.
It's a must-not-lose game, exactly. So we'll see what happens there. The base of the V is being attacked right now. And some questions are being asked of Magnus. They're saying, look, there are ways for you to swap off that knight, but do you really want to use the light-squared bishop to do it? It's such a powerful piece for white right now. I don't think that sort of trade is beneficial.
And a bit of a cool trick here from Magnus Carlsen. He's attacking the black knight, and if this knight moves and swoops in to capture a pawn, it will find itself pinned by one of the white rooks. The black queen will be behind it. That would lose a piece for Nihal Sarin, meaning he needs to either retreat the knight or sidestep with his own queen to defend it. That's a nice little kind of two-move tactic from Magnus Carlsen. Chess is all about these combinations, and that's a nice, effective one.
It's a two-move tactic that's bought him 30 seconds on the clock as well. That wasn't the longest think of the match, but you string 3 or 4 of those together, and it starts becoming problem territory.
Yeah, he forced Nihal to just lose a couple of moves with his queen as well, so costing time on the clock, costing time on the board, and white's queen improves. The white knight might start relocating as well. The white rooks could also find better posts. Nihal's lacking a plan here. Still very much a kind of stable, level-looking position due to the fact there are no pawn breaks, but Magnus surely happy with that scenario.
Here's my question. What's the white plan? Are we going for e4 in the medium to long term here?
It's always in the air, but first you want to improve every single piece of yours, right? And that's what Magnus does. He does double up on the C line. His queen, he might move it one step forward to place it on an active diagonal. Now Nihal offering some trades, so asking for some decisions here. The one thing you don't want to do is take knight takes knight. That would have ended up in a fork. Pawn takes knight, would have attacked the queen and the bishop. So Magnus simply retreats with the queen, now potentially threatening to recapture that knight with his own knight.
The plans will reveal themselves later. I think the first order of business for both sides is to try and put pieces on as active squares as possible. It's very difficult to kind of open lines. That is the problem. Here we see trying to close the center, Nihal Sarin. That makes sense. Blocking the center will favor the knights, but then again, Black has a very strong knight. How to improve the other one? Magnus now goes on the flank.
Well, he's going to be forced to improve the other one in a second. A4 with A5 threatened. This is a Route 1 strategy here, but a very, very real problem for Black to solve.
And it's one of Magnus's favorite moves, one of Magnus's favorite strategy in this position, especially when your opponent's knight is on the square, as was Nihal Sarin's. It sort of invites the A pawn to push forward and force it to retreat. It might not stop that. That pawn might even go to A6 to create those weaknesses that White was earlier trying to find. And I think it's so instructive. Whenever these two knights are either on B6 or G6, get those flank pawns moving to start targeting them.
Alfie, the A pawn, marching forward. It's going to act as a battering ram, trying to open up the enemy king. It's always controversial because you do push a pawn in front of your own king as well. And Nihal Sarin has played such a risky move. It's given a double question mark. This could be the match ending. Magnus Carlsen, the position is so blocked. If he doesn't take that pawn, he might not get a second opportunity. Nihal's taking a huge risk. And let's show what Magnus is now calculating. He'll invest a bit of time. We have time, therefore, to show on our analysis board, bishop takes pawn, taking advantage of the fact that pawn has moved forward. And the pawn recapturing would allow the white rooks into the game. This looks over. The black queen is hit. She's going to move forward with a check. But when the white king steps out of the way, the black king is left to its own devices. I don't really see any way to stem the tide here. We're going to see this play out on the board. There's a huge threat of rook takes pawn, and the black king might just be doomed. Let's go back and show. Magnus is going to show us what's about to happen. Checkmate incoming, potentially.
And he does fall back in that final position with his knight to defend it. Magnus on the attack. If he wins this, Nihal Sarin will be eliminated. His key will get crushed. The queen about to come into the attack. B3, B6, A7. That's game over. B7 checkmate. Thank you very much. I'm going to the semifinals is what Magnus is saying.
Look at Nihal Sarin. You can see the realization on his face suddenly. It's just knockout within a few moves. The only way to postpone this is to throw pieces away. You have to move the black knight out the way to bring the rooks across, but the black knight is trapped. Nihal Sarin, he looks devastated. This is his final moments in the Esports World Cup here in Riyadh.
It's the final few moves of it, and you can see it on him. You look at Nihal, and that's all you need to know about the position. Queen B3, a square that he cannot fight for, a square that he can't stop, and that would be checkmate incoming. Nihal Sarin knows it's time to say goodbye to Riyadh.
He's coming to terms with his position now. Magnus still cool as a cucumber. He was looking a little bit more intense before making that move, and that's because he was busy calculating out, making sure that there's absolutely no rescue. Nihal Sarin looking positively emotional now. The realization of what's happening is hitting him. Unfortunately, his life in the tournament is on the line, and there's nothing he can do now to stop this inevitable victory by the world #1.
This is heartbreaking. It's a quiet move, ultimately, that he'd missed. At the end of that variation, it was 3-4 move calculation to get to here, but he didn't realize that just pushing the rook forward would end in this devastating checkmate. He might be resigning any moment now, Nihal Sarin, as the white queen coming forward. We'll draw the arrows again to show what's about to happen. This will end the game. The black queen cannot bring herself over to that flank in time. She's cut off from the action.
And it all came down to that one pawn move. And Magnus Carlsen, it barely took any time for him. Nihal about to resign, and there it goes. Magnus Carlsen makes it to the semifinals.
Game 1 didn't quite convert, but upped
it off. Needs only a draw to book his spot into the finals. But will it be too less of a time to make that happen?
You have to imagine that if any players can do it, it'll be one of the Team Falcons players who are the fastest with the mouse here, arguably. So here we go. This is the Armageddon game. King's Indian defense being deployed.
King's Indian Part 2 after Hikaru won earlier with the black pieces in this opening. And we see the bayonet attack here from Magnus Carlsen, one of the most trendy variations in this opening. Blocked center, white playing on the queen side, black most likely later playing on the king side. Anyone's game, but quick moves from Hikaru. He's only spent a few seconds up to this point.
And after this sudden death Armageddon, a key will be crushed. Will it be Team Liquid's or will it be Hikaru's key right now? There is so much that rides on this final Armageddon of the day, and Hikaru does what King's Indian defense requires. He's got the Pawn Storm going on that right flank towards Magnus's king. This is game on. It starts looking scary, this position. F4, G5, 8-6, all of that coming up the board.
Now, the Black Pawn Storm, as we call it, the King's Indian trademark. Hikaru looks locked in, looks super focused. And Magnus is the first to go into the tank. He's burned over a minute of his time. He asked for this opening. Very brave from Magnus this time to go into an opening he's already lost in this match. But there we go. The White Knight jumping forward is another typical motif in this opening.
Also typical of Carlsen. You lost in this opening. That's fine. I want another go. I want another bite at the cherry. I want to make things right. He's not afraid of that challenge.
He's not afraid, and it looks like if you go by the evaluation bar, it's a great opening decision by him what he's gone. But usually in the King's Indian defense, the evaluation bar does not tell the full story. It very often gives an advantage to White, but the position is so complex, so dynamic, where Black's going for the attack, White aiming for that E6 square. Ideas on the Queen's side. David, how often have we seen the evaluation bar be completely wrong from a human perspective in this opening?
Exactly. It's deceptive. We'll ignore the eval bar for the next few moves unless it swings massively in either direction. This is the one opening that computers, that AI and others were still struggling to understand up until recently, always giving White an advantage due to the extra space, the D5 pawn as the spearhead. But Magnus forced back with his knight, forced into the retreat. Hikaru now stepping back with his rook. It's the clock times that tell a lot about this story. It is Hikaru's style. He's an attacker by heart, by nature. Magnus doesn't like defending these positions.
And he's coming in with those pawns next, right? 8-6 was only setting up F4 and G5. Magnus denies that. He goes for the trade of those pawns. Pawn takes pawn on the board, recaptured by the knight. But this does leave a beautiful E4 post for Magnus's knight to jump into.
Remember as well, Hikaru started with 6 minutes and 12 seconds. Magnus Carlsen with 10 minutes. So Hikaru has used less than half the time that Magnus has, but he has to keep this up for the entire game.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy. I was shocked actually that Hikaru took on F5 with his knight. They do say that every schoolboy knows you should take back on F5 with your pawn to establish a beautiful pawn center. Much more fluid, much more mobile there. And especially against Team Liquid, you want that fluid pawn structure. And here, look at this. The White Knight installed brilliantly in the middle of the board. Magnus, I think this is a huge step in the right direction for him. The last few moves, he's going to be very happy with.
Complete control of the light squares in the middle of the board. He lines up the queen, a battery there. Bishop takes knight. Now another piece replaces that central square. Hikaru, meanwhile, sets up a battery on the F line. The queen and the rook lined up. Ideas of the knight jumping to H4 to trying to deflect that defender on F3.
Magnus covers the central D4 outpost. Still a very cagey position. Hikaru steps forward. He's playing this like a must-win game, Hikaru. Even though a draw is sufficient, that's a great attitude. He wants to be aggressive, as he was talking about earlier in the day. The White Knight felt it was redundant on that F3 square. It's relocating, going to jump forward to hit the Black Queen. Still very cagey stuff. Magnus still with a 3-minute time advantage, though. And a bit of a mistake from Hikaru. The Black Rook sliding to the wrong side of the board. Knight G4 in the air.
Okay. And it comes in, it hits the queen. There are big ideas. The queen needs to stay connected to that Black Knight. It moves back to F8.
Wow, apparently there's a brilliant tactic that gives Magnus a huge advantage in this position. It's difficult, it's hidden, it's unlikely to appear. I'm going to say for a human in a situation like this, tough. But bishop takes pawn on E5, bang, blowing open the center.
Wow.
And after a recapture, the White Rook is going to slide across, pinning the Black Knight, just like Hikaru pinned his knight in the previous game. White is going to win back the material that he just sacrificed with interest. Is Magnus going to find this? That is the key. This would be the continuation of the variation that he would need to see at the very end, with a knight fork, winning the Black Queen, emerging with a couple of extra pawns. Magnus misses it. Queen to D3 instead. Missed opportunity by the world number one, Hikaru, probably breathing a sigh of relief.
That was a long line to calculate, and especially that maneuver at the end by the knight winning the queen. You know, someone taps Magnus on the shoulder, tells him there's something in the position, he finds it. But to realize that this is the critical moment that something exists is the hardest part about chess. Instead, Magnus going the wrong way, another inaccuracy on the board.
It's something so difficult to see in the moment as well. And here we go. We have a little bit of liquidation on the queen side of the board. The rooks have been swapped off on the A file. There is no longer a pawn there. And now we've got white potentially taking the pawn on B6 at the end of that sequence.
Yeah, Magnus can swoop now. The white rook is poised as we see Hikaru actually pre-moving, expecting Magnus to take the knight in the center of the board instead. But why is he hesitating? There we go. Magnus Carlsen takes. Be careful. There are some forks in the air. Black is threatening to play rook takes bishop, followed by a nasty knight fork. That would be a winning tactic. Magnus needs to get out of that. He needs to sidestep with his king or defend the e2 square with his rook. Anything else, Hikaru might take this game.
And the time situation is beginning to get better and better for Hikaru Nakamura. He's down to 4 minutes flat. Magnus Carlsen, though, 5:45. Yes, he's still ahead, but that difference between those two times, which started at nearly 4 minutes, is now closer to 1.
But Magnus needs to be super careful. He could be lost in one move. He needs to find a good way to stop this trap that has been set up. He moves his king, sidesteps, and he forks. And there we have Hikaru Nakamura with his decision, stepping in with the rook to the second rank, now threatening a checkmate in one. Queen takes pawn. Fight is on. Magnus on the defense.
Checkmate threatened. Magnus needs to defend against this, needs to hold the gate. He retreats his knight. Not a happy move. The knight misplaced on the first rank, but out of necessity there. Long-term, Magnus is doing very well. Strategically, Magnus has the advantage. If he can get the queens off, he's loving life. Hikaru, though, going on the attack yet again, creating threats, and wow, Hikaru's trapped his own rook. The white queen retreating. That black rook has no escape squares.
He missed it. He completely missed the shot, and Magnus on top of things. He knows it. Queen takes rook. You've got nowhere to hide. If you put that on e2, bishop takes knight. Get rid of the defender. You have no time to capture the knight on d1, Hikaru Nakamura. What a miss. Rook b8 coming in as well. It's not only attacking the queen, but about to win Hikaru's queen, and Hikaru panicking there.
It's all gone wrong for Hikaru Nakamura in the space of one move. It was a very attacking position, a very promising position, one he would have enjoyed. But this double attack, very sneaky there from Magnus Carlsen, has just one material. Now the black rook drops off, exchange up, rook for knight.
But he will fight on. With the queen, knight, and bishop around the white king, Magnus has to go on the attack. Otherwise, Hikaru's queen's about to come in on h2, threatening some big checks.
And you can see the mentality from Hikaru, that champion's mentality. He slumped in his chair when he realized that was a big mistake, and he got back up within a fraction of a second, and he was instantly calculating, what can I do next? How can I still make something out of this game?
This is still so complicated. Magnus has a very narrow path here to victory. His bishop is attacked. The black queen is super active. He needs to slide back. Great defensive move there. Hitting the black bishop, defending the white bishop, and setting up some checks. The white bishop hoping to slide into h7, forcing Hikaru back with his bishop. We saw Hikaru almost banging the table there. Look at the eval bar. Magnus is winning. White is winning, but can he put the finishing touches on? It's 4.5 minutes against under 3 minutes now. Still anything possible.
Exchange up, simplification here, favoring the player who's currently ahead, Hikaru, getting more and more frustrated as he sits because he has fewer pieces with which to create the complications that he so desperately wants and needs in this game.
But Magnus Carlsen's the one who is playing for the win here. He goes in with a check. And now look at that beautiful move. Retreats the bishop. Once the king is disconnected from the bishop, he disconnects the queen from that dark squared bishop. Rook takes bishop is the big threat. Hikaru Nakamura, is he giving up?
Hikaru looks devastated. He's going to slide his king across to defend the bishop. The white rook is perfectly placed. The white bishop perfectly placed. All Magnus needs to do is bring in his queen. But Hikaru looks so frustrated, giving up hope. Where is the finishing blow? Magnus looking for it with 4 minutes left. Hits the black queen. He's going to kick her away. And now he's going to give a check with his bishop. The black king has nowhere to go. The white queen poised to swoop in. And that might just spell the end. Hikaru gets ready to resign. Checkmate incoming. It's going to end here and now. Oh, great sportsmanship.
Ruja needs to win on command with the black pieces in order for this set to go to Armageddon. Very possible, but let's see how this pans out.
Magnus Carlsen, whenever he's happy with a draw with white, he opens with his king's pawn. It's just a fact. He knows his openings. It's so difficult to create winning chances with black. He tries the Sicilian Alireza Firouzja. He's met with the Alapin, the C3 Sicilian. This is something Magnus has used on multiple occasions, including in the World Cup final against Prague, when he just needed a draw with white. Firouzja, he needs something special now.
And David, I know that the Alapin Sicilian is also one of your pet openings, something that you've employed so many times. Magnus Carlsen does it every time that he needs to shut down the game. Where do you think, approaching this as blacks, as with the black pieces, will Alireza find his chances? What are the plans that he needs to put into place here?
Yeah, I think steering away from some of the main lines is the key. There are a lot of forcing lines in this opening. That's why Magnus has gone for it. There's a lot of opening theory that leads to sterile equality, where you don't really get out into this game. You don't really maintain any winning chances. Okay, I was going to say, play something offbeat. Pawn to b6, we see the eval bar rise. That is very offbeat. Doesn't fight for the center, but I totally understand the reasoning for it.
I was going to ask you, when you would play the Alapin, was there a move by black that you feared that perhaps Alireza could try?
Pawn to d6 is the best move, but in terms of winning with black, I'm not so sure. Equalizing is normally the goal in chess with black, but not enough this time. b6, he just wants to fianchetto his bishop. Magnus might be forced to attack if Firouzja doesn't play in the center. Magnus is going to go on the front foot, but maybe that's not what he wants to do.
And for white, one of the very key ideas is to go d4 in these positions. You want to get that center control, get the bishop out to c4, try attacking the knight as well. But Magnus, he takes a pause, so definitely b6, a surprise.
So, Magnus Carlsen down on the clock. Okay, not by much, but it's so rare in this grand final, we might as well mention it when it happens. Alireza Firouzja, though, not looking just for an equal position. We need to win, remember. Pawn takes pawn in the center of the board. Firouzja looking like he wants to hopefully start building a little bit of clock advantage. Recaptures with the knight. And finally, Firouzja goes down to below 9 minutes. Still very, very early on in this game.
Still just move 6, and both players definitely freestyling. Neither side has studied this one before, we can guarantee that. Knight takes pawn on d4. Normally you want a queen there, but Magnus senses the white knight will be very active. The white queen could jump out early in this scenario, and Firouzja needs to just trust himself, make moves at this point. The bishop comes out quickly. I like the way he's handled this opening, I've got to say, Alireza. I think he'll get it some chances at some point. The black knight kicked back meanwhile, and the game goes on.
It does go on, and this rivalry goes on. You know, I'm thinking right now of back in 2021 when Magnus Carlsen shocked the world, moved away from the World Championship crown, walked away from it, but said that he would be willing to fight if it was Alireza Firouzja who would challenge him, who would go on to win and then challenge him. That would make Magnus interested in getting back to the World Championship. That's the kind of respect he had. That's the kind of challenge he wanted to relish against the prince, Alireza Firouzja. And we never got that classical World Championship match, but we're getting the matchup here at the biggest global esports stage, at the esports arena. The king versus the prince, but so far, it's been a Magnus Carlsen show.
Do you think maybe that that actually plays on Firouzja's mind as well, knowing that Carlsen has said that about you? It's very difficult not to let that affect you psychologically, going, ooh, this is the match that he said he'd be happy to play. I really need to not disappoint. I need to go in with a bang. I need to really prove myself. And so far, we've seen flashes of that brilliance that does enable him to compete with Carlsen at the highest level. That said, he hasn't been able to consistently show that throughout this grand final, at least not so far.
Yeah, there's two ways you can take compliments from the world's best ever player. You can say, oh, thank you, I'm going to prove you right. Or you feel the pressure, you feel the expectation. And I mean, instinct-wise, we've seen it so many times. Firouzja digs himself out of trouble on the clock. That's because his instincts are just fantastic. And there we see Team Liquid and the fans looking happy right now. But yeah, Firouzja just hasn't been trusting himself. He needs to go for it now. Pawn to h4, not liked by the computer, I should mention. Magnus Carlsen wants to win this one in style. He's trying to punish black for not finishing development, not castling yet. But the white e-pawn, a bit weak. I'm liking Firouzja's chances here if he can strike somehow in the center.
This move just makes me feel like Magnus wants to have fun in this game. There's absolutely no reason for him to go for this. You know, you play the Alapin, it signals that you want to keep things under control. Then you push the h-pawn voluntarily instead of continuing with getting development and getting your king to safety. Magnus Carlsen is in for a fight, but that is exactly what might give Firouzja his chance.
Yeah, and remember Magnus, when he was close to knocking down Hikaru in the final game of their match, at least the final of the sixth yesterday, he got nervous. He did blunder.
Yep.
It is possible. He's human. So Firouzja cannot kind of give up hope at any point yet.
Very easy to forget sometimes that our champions, our heroes, the GOATs, are human as well. And, you know, at some point, the torch will pass from Magnus Carlsen to the younger generation. He's here to say, yes, it will happen, just not today.
If Alireza wins this game and makes the comeback into the match to force an Armageddon, that would be a huge momentum shift. I'd go on to say that he'd be a favorite in that Armageddon, you know, given his speed skills, especially when you're down to 30 seconds. That is his best hope right now. And I think the way Magnus is playing, pushing his pawns, delaying his development, this is going to be a feisty game.
I'm going to call it. I think this is going to get crazy. I don't know the result, of course. Difficult to make any predictions here, but I feel that Firouzja is going to get some chances in this one. Already some tactics in the air. The most obvious move would be to push a pawn forward, break open the black bishop, but maybe we could investigate a bit further because Alireza Firouzja has what could be a golden opportunity to shock Magnus Carlsen right now. Not only can he open up that bishop, he can do it forcefully and in style. Knight takes pawn. If the white bishop takes back, then the black bishop takes on f3, removing the defender, hitting the white queen, and when the white queen recaptures, when the dust settles, bishop takes bishop, black has won a pawn with a nice pin to boot. If we go back, after knight takes e5, if the white knight recaptures, then black just says, calm, d6, open the diagonal for my bishop, please, and look at the white knights. Look at the black bishop. It's sniping. It's going to regain the material with interest. This is super complicated. White can even give a check at the end of this with his queen. The game goes on, but Firouzja, he has to take risks like this. He has to gamble.
But this is the one moment I'm glad that he's paused and spending time, because this is a critical decision. And it'll all be worth it. All those minutes spent will be worth it if he plays knight takes pawn. That's a huge advantage. You go up a pawn, your bishop becomes a big piece here.
And of course, we have the aid of the eval bar here. We have the aid of some very powerful engines, but Alireza Firouzja, he has the aid of his fantastic instincts. He's paused for a reason. Magnus Carlsen will be jumping out of his chair if he sees the move knight takes e5. He's got to play it. He's got to find it.
Has to be played, right? Especially if you spend so much time and energy calculating this out. I feel like it should happen on the board.
But do you think if Magnus has spotted it, he'll give it away? Because he's also the kind of player who just keeps that poker face until his opponent has made his decision. The more Alireza thinks, I think the higher chances that he spots it.
Who's going to spot it? Let's take a look at Alireza's screen, perhaps. It looks like he was about to push his pawn forward to d6. He does miss the opportunity. It was complicated. It was difficult. It was so hard to evaluate, but he could have played that move so much quicker. Now the black king castles. Status quo has been maintained. Magnus is holding this together with a pin.
But here's the thing, right? Because if Alireza did not go for knight takes pawn and wanted to make the move d6, again, you make it in 20 seconds.
Right.
But if you take your time, then you find that central blow.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all for missing that. I think superhuman almost, that tactic. But what he's played, the fact that it took him over 2 minutes to play d6.
That's the problem.
That's
That's the issue.
So now 7 minutes plays under 4. Unfortunately, familiar territory here in what potentially could be the last game. Remember, if Magnus Carlsen wins this game, he does not only win the set, he wins the match. So Firouzja needs to win, needs to find a way to crack open the position and take this victory from Magnus Carlsen to force an Armageddon.
Well, there was tension at the center of the board, and what Alireza has done is he slides his rook, defends the bishop, and now can go on to win a pawn. That e5 pawn, now that the bishop on b7 is guarded, knight takes e5. Alireza again, and he does it, but he takes it with his own pawn first, doubling up on the e-file.
That's very surprising. He could have done the same thing, but in a more forceful way. If black had taken with the knight, white would have been forced into a variation that could have happened anyway. He basically gave Magnus more choice. And although the position's still now level in the balance, black with the bishop pair, Magnus might be breathing a sigh of relief. He has control over the diagonals for now, although still a hard position to handle. I think easier to play for black, I'm going to say, because white's queenside pawns are slightly overextended, are slightly loose. And of course, we've been talking about bishops today. Alireza with that up his sleeve.
in an open game, right? And both bishops on the longest diagonal of the board. And guess what? The knight joining the party as well jumps onto that central d4 square. I wonder if Magnus will do the same, go knight d5. There are tactics in the air. He might want to trade pieces off, but it looks like that might work in Magnus's favor if you jump with that knight to the d5 square, given the tension along the c line.
Oh, that's a good way to trade pieces, get Magnus closer to the draw that he needs.
It's also frustrating that the queen can't just sidestep for Firouzja to c7 because of the ominous presence of White's dark square bishop, effectively meaning the queen stays on the d-line longer, increasing the probability that the queens come off at some point soon. We're trying our best to figure out a way to keep everything on, to keep the tension, to keep the complications, but I think Black is struggling to do that here. And again, opportunity to trade queens, and this time it's Magnus that says no, maybe playing on the clock pressure here as it goes to 6 versus 3.
Exactly, Magnus has sped up again. Not for the first time, he's barely spent over 30 seconds for a single move in this game, and look at this, pawn to e6, the first blunder of this game, the first mistake. The white rooks are going to hit the black queen. It could be over now. The black queen has no good squares. Wherever you go, there's a double attack or a fork. Magnus now looking at the fans, smiling. He knows he's close. He knows he's about to get it. Team Liquid on the edges of their seats.
He knows this is over. The knight about to jump in with a big fork in the position, going material up. Firouzja will fight. He will try to play this on, but I'm not even sure for how long. This is completely busted for Black. Magnus Carlsen vibing there.
There we go, knight for rook. Magnus has extra material. He's the exchange up. He's getting close now. The white rooks are coming in. The white c-pawn sprinting forward. Firouzja has minimal counterplay. The white queen holds everything. Is this the final few moves of the Esports World Cup 2025? The black bishop trying to stem the tide, but it's desperate now.
Desperation on Firouzja. Magnus there, he wants to put the finishing touches as quickly as possible, but the whole show, the whole match by Magnus has been dominant so far.
This is absolutely incredible. Alireza Firouzja in a must-win situation. Magnus Carlsen had no business being this aggressive, gunning for this victory, but he only knows one mode. He truly has the heart of a champion, and he is displaying that here, saying, yes, I get that a draw is good enough, but here, watch what I can do.
Well, here at the Esports World Cup, he knows only one mode. That is that when liquid flows, it drowns everything.
Absolutely incredible stuff. Imperious from Magnus Carlsen, but it's not over yet. 5v2, material advantage. All the chips are stacked in his favor. Blunders can still happen. It is never over until it's over. He has to earn that full point.
Everything is earned here. Magnus Carlsen looking up. He's in calculation mode, trying to figure out if he can force it here and now. But there must be a little bit of a ghost in his mind. There was a blunder in game 1 of this second set when he had a winning position, up on time, up on the board. So Magnus, that's why he's double checking everything. That's why he's slowed down slightly. The longer this game goes on, the more hope for Firouzja. It's just a challenge, staying alive.
Remember, you make your own luck. You need to try and find a way to tempt Magnus into that mistake. Those mistakes do happen, but Firouzja needs to make it happen on command. Queens off the board, and victory looking that much more remote.
And Magnus needs only a draw to win the match. He doesn't even need to win this game. He's completely winning.
And look at this, the c-pawn now forcing its way through. We're going to see the final move of the tournament.
Brilliant stuff by Magnus.